Let's move into paragraph 6E, title notices. This section provides important disclosures to help the buyer understand any obligations, risks, or restrictions that come with owning the property. Let's start with one abstract or title policy. The buyer is advised to have an attorney review either an abstract of title or the title insurance policy. If a title policy is provided, it's important for the buyer's attorney to review the commitment promptly because the buyer's time to object is limited. 2. Membership in Property Owners Association. Next, the contract asks if the property is or is not part of a mandatory property owners association. If it is, the buyer is required to join the association and pay dues or assessments, which can change over time. Failure to pay can even lead to a lien or foreclosure. The buyer has the right to request the HOA's governing documents, including rules, restrictions, and a resale certificate. If the buyer is concerned about these terms, the TREC HOA addendum should be included. 3. Statutory tax districts. If the property is located in a special tax district like a municipal utility district, MUD, or water control and improvement district, WCID, the seller is required to give the buyer a statutory notice as outlined in the Texas Water Code. These districts fund infrastructure services such as water, sewer, drainage, and flood control, and they can significantly increase the overall tax rate on the property. In the past, there was a HAR form used to notify buyers of a MUD district, but that form is no longer valid or in use. Today, each MUD district is required by law to provide a pre-filled notice to purchaser on its website, though not all are fully compliant yet. To locate this notice, a good starting point is the local appraisal district site, like HSAD for Harris County. There you can search the property and see which MUD district it's in. In HCAD, there's often a direct link to the MUD district's website. Once there, look for a section titled something like Notice to Purchaser or Notice to Buyer. Note, on some sites, it may be difficult to locate. Keep in mind, this notice must be provided to the buyer before the contract is executed. Failing to do so can result in serious legal issues or allow the buyer to terminate. If you're having trouble locating the correct district or need more information, use the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality's interactive water district map. You can find it by scanning the QR code below. This map allows you to search every water district in the state and view detailed data about the district's boundaries and services. Next up, we'll talk about coastal disclosures and what happens if the property touches tidally influenced waters. For tidewaters, if the property touches tidally influenced waters, such as bays, inlets, or the Gulf Coast, it triggers a special disclosure requirement under the Texas Natural Resources Code, Section 33.135. In these cases, the seller must include a specific coastal area notice in the contract. This isn't just a best practice, it's the law. The purpose of this notice is to inform the buyer that structures built seaward of the vegetation line may be subject to removal by the state if a major storm causes erosion or changes the shoreline. This is critical for properties near the beach or waterfront, especially in counties like Galveston, Brazoria, or Nueces. Buyers need to understand that ownership rights near coastal waters come with risks, like erosion, access issues, or property use restrictions enforced by the Texas General Land Office. The TREC promulgated form used for this disclosure is called the Addendum for Coastal Area Property, and you can download the most recent version directly from the TREC website. Scan the QR code below. This form must be attached to the contract when required, and it must be signed by the buyer to acknowledge receipt. If the notice is not delivered, the buyer may have the right to terminate the contract. If you're unsure whether the property qualifies, check floodplain maps, FEMA zones, and consult your title company, as they often flag coastal disclosures during the title commitment process. Let's dive into paragraph 6E5 of the Texas 1-4 Family Residential Contract, which deals with annexation. This paragraph is required under Section 5.011 of the Texas Property Code and applies when the property is located outside the boundaries of an incorporated city. The seller is required to notify the buyer that the property may now or at some point in the future fall within a city's extraterritorial jurisdiction, also known as the ETJ, and could later be annexed into the city. What is the ETJ? The ETJ is a buffer zone that surrounds most Texas cities. Even though it's not technically inside city limits, the city can still exercise certain powers there. like approving plats or regulating development standards. If the property is annexed, the buyer may become responsible for city property taxes, municipal zoning or land use regulations, hookup requirements for water, sewer, or other services. What buyers should do. Buyers considering rural or suburban properties should take the time to contact the planning or zoning department of nearby cities to ask 1. Is this property currently in a city's ETJ? 2. Are there any annexation plans for this area? 3. Most cities maintain maps of their boundaries and ETJs, which are available online through city websites or GIS mapping tools. Form reference. This annexation disclosure is already included in the main TREC contract. You do not need a separate addendum. This built-in notice satisfies the legal requirement under the Texas Property Code. Just make sure your client reads and understands the potential impact of annexation. Next, we'll cover paragraph 6E6, which deals with certificated utility service areas and how they can affect your access to water and sewer services. Let's move on to paragraph 6E6, which deals with properties located in what's called a certificated utility service area. What is a certificated service area? A certificated service area is a region that a water or sewer provider is legally authorized to serve, as approved by the Public Utility Commission of Texas, PUC. If the property you're buying is located within one of these areas, the buyer may be required to pay additional fees or wait for infrastructure like water or sewer lines to be extended before service can be provided. Required disclosure. This paragraph includes a statutory notice required by Texas Water Code Section 257. The seller must inform the buyer if the property is located in a certificated water or sewer area and must provide a written notice using the exact language required by law. This notice is included directly in the contract in paragraph 6E6 and must be acknowledged by the buyer at or before contract execution or closing. Why it matters? Some of these certificated providers may be private water companies or co-ops, not city utilities, and fees can vary widely. For example, connection fees could range from a few hundred to several $1,000s. There might be delays if infrastructure hasn't yet been built out in a rural subdivision. You may be restricted to specific providers, no competitive shopping for rates. How to check if a property is in a certificated area. To verify this, you can visit the PUC of Texas website or check the provider name and service area using tools like TCEQ Water District Viewer. This interactive map lets you search by address or zoom in to view water and sewer service boundaries throughout Texas. Agent tip. For rural listings or new subdivisions outside city limits, always confirm whether a water or sewer connection is available and what it will cost. Your buyer will thank you for helping them avoid surprises. Next, we'll explore paragraph 6E7, which discusses public improvement districts or PIDs and the additional costs and disclosures they may involve. Now let's take a look at paragraph 6E7, which focuses on properties located within a public improvement district or PID. What is a PID? A public improvement district is a special taxing area created by a local government, typically a city or county, to fund improvements like roads, parks, lighting, drainage, and even landscaping within a specific development. Property owners within a PID are required to pay special assessments, often annually, to cover the costs of those improvements. These assessments are in addition to regular property taxes. PIDs are commonly found in newer master plan communities and suburban developments where upfront infrastructure costs are financed over time through these assessments. Required disclosure. Under Texas Property Code Section 5014, if a property is located within a PID, the seller is legally required to give the buyer a written notice before the contract is executed. This PID notice includes important information such as the total amount of the assessment, the payment frequency, usually annually, the duration of the assessment period, possible lien and foreclosure consequences for non-payment. Failure to provide this notice on time gives the buyer the right to terminate the contract. TREC provides a standardized notice form titled the Notice of Obligation to Pay Improvement District Assessment. You can download the latest version here. TREC PID Notice Form 53-0. How to know if a property is in a PID. Check the seller's most recent tax statement, ask the title company, or search the appraisal district's records. PIDs are usually listed as a separate line item under taxing jurisdictions or special assessments. Many counties, such as Denton, Collin, and Williamson, also provide PID boundary maps on their official websites. Agent tip: don't assume a property isn't in a PID just because it's not in a gated community. PIDs are often present in large subdivisions with newer infrastructure. Make sure your seller provides the correct form up front to avoid delays or legal issues. Up next, we'll break down paragraph 6E8, which deals with private transfer fees, another special cost that may apply when property changes hands. Let's move on to paragraph 6E8, which covers private transfer fees, something that can easily be overlooked but can create confusion or delays at closing if not addressed early. What is a private transfer fee? A private transfer fee is a charge that is collected each time the property is sold. These fees are typically paid to a third party, such as a developer, a private association, or even a previous owner, and not to a government or taxing authority. These fees are most often set up in the property's deed restrictions or covenants and can run for decades. They may be a flat dollar amount or a percentage of the sales price. For example, 0.25% of the sale price each time the property is transferred. Under Texas Property Code Section 5.205, sellers are required to notify buyers if the property is subject to a private transfer fee obligation. This is a mandatory disclosure, and failure to provide it may give the buyer a right to terminate the contract or delay closing. This paragraph in the contract acts as the formal notification that the buyer should investigate whether any such fee exists. If so, the details should be disclosed in the title commitment or HOA documents. How to identify transfer fees. Private transfer fees aren't always easy to spot. They may appear in 1. The subdivision's declaration of covenants, conditions, and restrictions, CC and Rs. 2. Title commitment Schedule B documents. 3. HOA resale certificates or association bylaws. The title company and the seller's HOA documents are the best sources for confirming whether a private transfer fee applies. Why it matters. Buyers need to know in advance if they'll be responsible for a transfer fee, because it's a cost that gets paid at closing. It may also affect how attractive the property is to future buyers. Agent tip: always ask your seller if they are aware of any private transfer fees. If the property is in a master planned or gated community or was developed by a large builder, transfer fees are more likely to apply. Flag this early and ensure it's addressed by the title company. There is no separate TREC form for transfer fee disclosure. Instead, this is covered directly in paragraph 6E8 of the TREC 1 to 4 family residential contract. Next, we'll talk about paragraph 6E9, which covers properties located in regulated propane gas system service areas, another utility-related disclosure that comes with specific legal requirements. Let's move on to paragraph 6E9, which deals with properties located in a propane gas system service area. This is a specialized disclosure that applies in certain rural or suburban communities in Texas. What is a propane gas system service area? In some neighborhoods or subdivisions, especially those in areas where natural gas lines aren't available, a centralized propane distribution system is installed and maintained by a private utility company known as a distribution system retailer. If a property is located in one of these service areas, the homeowner must use that company as their propane provider. They may not be able to shop for alternative vendors or negotiate rates. Required disclosure. Under Texas Utilities Code, Section 141.010, sellers must notify the buyer in writing if the property is located in a propane gas system service area that is owned by a distribution system retailer. This disclosure must be made using the specific language required by law, and it should be delivered before the contract is executed. TREC has created a promulgated form specifically for this notice. It's called the Addendum for Property in a Propane Gas System Service Area. Scan and download the form here in QR code. TREC Form 470 Propane Gas System Service Area. Buyers need to know that. They'll be limited to using the designated propane provider. Service and delivery charges may vary. They could be responsible for infrastructure fees, maintenance, or minimum monthly usage charges. This can affect not only monthly utility costs, but also future resale appeal if buyers are wary of monopolized service options. Agent tip: if you're listing a property in a more rural subdivision or master planned community that uses propane, check early with the seller or HOA. Look for documentation from the propane company, and if applicable, ensure the addendum is completed and attached to the contract. Form reminder. This notice is not built into the main contract. It must be provided separately using TREC Form 470. Attach it to the contract and have both parties sign it to ensure compliance with the Utilities Code. Up next, we'll cover paragraph 6E10, which involves water level fluctuations, an important notice for buyers purchasing waterfront or lakeside property. Now let's look at paragraph 6E10, which deals with properties that adjoin large bodies of water, like lakes, reservoirs, or impoundments. This paragraph is known as the water level fluctuation notice. Why this notice exists. If a property borders a man-made or managed body of water, like Lake Conroe, Lake Travis, or similar reservoirs, it may be subject to changes in water levels due to weather conditions or water management decisions by public authorities. This notice is required by Chapter 11 of the Texas Water Code and applies specifically to bodies of water that have a storage capacity of 5,000 acre-feet or more at their normal operating level. That's a large body of water, typically one that supports municipal water supply, irrigation, flood control, or power generation. What the notice says? This paragraph notifies the buyer that the water level may fluctuate due to factors such as use of water rights by authorized entities like a water district or power plant, droughts or flood conditions, seasonal management strategies. In short, if you're buying a waterfront property, the shoreline may not always look the same, and it's not guaranteed to remain constant year-round. Why it matters to buyers. This notice is especially important for buyers who plan to use the water for boating, fishing, or maintaining a dock, or who are paying a premium for a waterfront view. Buyers need to understand that even though the property line may go up to the water, the actual water level may change drastically throughout the year. Agent tip. If you're representing a buyer purchasing waterfront property, encourage them to visit the lake or reservoir during different seasons if possible, or contact the managing authority for historical fluctuation data. You can also check with the local river authority or water district like the Lower Colorado River Authority, LCRA, or San Jacinto River Authority, SJRA, for water management plans and lake level charts. This disclosure is built directly into the contract. You don't need a separate form. Next, we'll wrap up the title notices section by looking at paragraph 6E11, which confirms that all required notices like MUD, PID, and others have been provided or attached to the contract. Paragraph 11, Certificate of Mold Remediation from the TREC 1 to 4 Family Residential Contract. This paragraph is all about what happens if the property has ever had mold and what the seller is legally required to disclose. Here's what the contract says. If the property has been remediated for mold in the last 5 years, the seller must provide the buyer with a certificate of mold remediation for each instance. But it's not just any paperwork. This certificate must meet Texas Occupations Code section 1958.154, which means the mold must have been assessed and removed by licensed professionals. The remediation must have followed proper state protocols. The certificate should clearly show the work was completed and the property is safe for occupancy. Why does this matter? Mold is serious. It can impact health, property value, and insurance. By requiring this certificate, the contract protects the buyer from unknowingly purchasing a property with a past mold problem that wasn't properly handled. As an agent, always ask your seller upfront if there has ever been mold remediation. If the answer is yes, make sure they have the certificate ready. No certificate? That's a red flag because it might mean the work was not done to code or not disclosed. Paragraph 12, Required notices from the Texas 1 to 4 Family Residential Contract. This paragraph is short but powerful. It's all about making sure the buyer gets important statutory notices, and it can impact whether the contract holds up or not. The following notices have been given or are attached to this contract. This blank line is where you list any mandatory disclosures or statutory notices that apply to the property. Examples include MUD and WCID notices 6E3, Coastal Area Addendum 6E4, Annexation 6E5, Certificated Utility Service Area Notice 6E6, PID Notice 6E7, Private Transfer Fee Disclosure 6E8, Propane Gas Service Area Addendum 6E9, Water Level Fluctuation Notice 6E10. Why it matters. These notices are required by Texas law. If the seller fails to give them to the buyer at the time the contract is signed, the buyer may have legal remedies or even the right to terminate the contract. Agents, don't skip this section. If the property is located in a special district or has utility-related notices, make sure they're listed and attached. This protects your client from future liability and keeps the transaction compliant with TREC rules. Outro. And that's it for paragraph 12, required notices. Short but serious. If you found this breakdown helpful, be sure to like, subscribe, and check out the next video where we continue breaking down the contract paragraph by paragraph. Leave a comment if you've ever had a deal delayed because of a missing MUD or PID notice.